House Bill 616, for those who are not aware, is fundamentally a fusion of the worst parts of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill with the worst, most ridiculous pieces of the CRT nonsense. And it is an attempt to bring all of this into Ohio public school classrooms. So I have a resolution that I will be offering to the board for consideration this evening, but first I have some remarks that I would like to share. As most of you know, I'm an American history teacher, and I take the teaching of American history very, very seriously, and it's something that I love, and I think that it is very important for our students to learn about the great days in American history, and there have been many. But perhaps it is more important for our students to learn about the days that we are not terribly proud of. And there have been many of those as well. But it's by learning about the days that we are not proud of that we make the decisions and we make the changes to move forward and become a better nation and better people. So my remarks are as follows. There is so much wrong with this bill that it is genuinely hard to know where to begin. Do we begin by trying to dismantle the notion that institutional racism does not exist? Is that necessary when this very bill is evidence not only of the existence of institutional racism, but of the attempts of some in power to see institutional racism become the rule instead of the exception? Or should we begin by calling out the hypocrisy of legislators who routinely drape themselves in the banners of local control and of small government, while simultaneously trying to micromanage our local schools? While we're talking about hypocrisy, supporters of 616 say that they are protecting our students from indoctrination, but the truth is that by censoring everything that doesn't support their beliefs, they themselves are the ones attempting to indoctrinate Ohio's school children. It is worth pointing out that some legislators who recently voted to allow virtually anyone to carry concealed weapons now insist that learning about some of the less flattering moments in American history is just too dangerous. And let's not forget that just last year they insisted that Ohioans not be required to wear masks. So the same people who were okay with our school children being exposed to a deadly virus are not okay with them learning about families with parents who look different than their own. Ohio has real problems. Our unemployment rate is significantly higher than the national rate. Nearly 250,000 Ohioans are still out of work. But instead of doing the hard work necessary to address real problems being faced by real families, these legislators have decided to create and solve a completely fabricated series of problems. Solving problems that you have made up is easy. We need a legislature that is interested in doing the hard work that helps Ohio rise, not the lazy, headline-driven work that pulls us down and tears us apart. Not long ago, I had the pleasure of hearing Reverend Dr. Otis Moss speak. While Reverend Moss was not speaking directly about House Bill 616 when he uttered these words, his message provides an important reminder for us tonight. He told us, history is my story, your story, his story, her story, and our story. To neglect any one of these is to do damage to civilization and to human development. If I know only my story, I am selfish, half-informed, and at best, half-true. So with that in mind, I offer the following resolution. Whereas, Ohio House Bill 616 has been introduced to amend and enact sections of the Ohio Revised Code regarding the promotion and teaching of divisive or racist concepts in Ohio's public schools. And whereas, provisions within this bill are contrary to the values of the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education as expressed in its educational equity policy. And whereas Board Policy 4122.03, educational equity states, quote, "The responsibility for the disparities among our young people rests with adults, not the children." Our policy further states that complex societal and historical factors contribute to the inequities our students face. Nonetheless, rather than perpetuating disparities, the district must address and overcome this institutional inequity, providing all students with the support and opportunity to succeed. House Bill 616 would obstruct our ability to address those historical factors. And whereas, far from eliminating racism and discrimination as envisioned by the board's equity policy, House Bill 616 would perpetuate racism and discrimination and would limit the concepts, ideas, and materials that may be taught and used in the classroom to combat racism and other forms of discrimination. And whereas House Bill 616 is poorly written, allowing the State Board of Education to define concepts it finds divisive or not age and developmentally appropriate, we remind the legislature that the only current member of our State Board of Education who is a licensed educator opposes House Bill 616. And whereas the Board of Education is concerned that House Bill 616 seeks to limit candid conversations about race and gender identity in our schools and spaces in which all children should feel safe and welcome, the Board of Education is further concerned that HB 616 embraces fear and would exacerbate a mental health crisis that already exists within our schools and community in the wake of the pandemic. And whereas, in November of 2003, the city of Cleveland Heights was the first municipality in the country to adopt a domestic partner registry through a ballot initiative. And all three of our host cities pride themselves as places where families are all welcome and safe. And whereas, in the Cleveland Heights University Heights School District, public is for all is not a slogan, it is our ethos. So we encourage legislators to return to their traditional home rule stance by not imposing their cultural agenda onto our community. Therefore, be it resolved that the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education believes that our state-licensed professional teachers and administrators are best qualified to make decisions regarding the appropriateness of instructional materials and techniques in our classrooms. Be it further resolved that the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education strongly opposes House Bill 616. The superintendent is directed to forward this resolution to the Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives.
Dan, thank you.
You are
I
very
know
welcome.
that this represents an enormous amount of work and thought, and I think you have really incorporated everything I can think of that is connected to this and really laid out what is so wrong with House Bill 616.
Well, I must say, actually, I should have begun with this, that this is modeled after a similar resolution, as we often do. We share resources among school boards and everybody around the state. This is modeled after a resolution that is being presented, I believe, this week in the Cincinnati schools. So I personalized it with some of the things that I think are particularly important in this district.
In reading the bill, which I attempted to do, a few things jump out at me. One is that the state wants to impose a requirement that each school district create a mechanism by which individuals may file a complaint against a teacher, administrator, or superintendent alleging a violation of this bill. And they also put in a section about how if the superintendent of schools at the state level finds that a teacher, administrator, or a superintendent is in breach of this bill, then the state can come and take away your license for teaching something that somebody else disagrees with. This completely undermines the whole point of education. We are tasked with teaching our children how to work with people they don't know, how to come to agreement with people they may disagree with, how to learn things that are unfamiliar and incorporate them into their worldview, how to stretch their worldview so that they can go off as adults and become successful, independent, able to make their communities stronger and better places to live. And this bill tells us that we need to be punished for doing precisely our job.
And defunded.
Oh, yeah, that. But, you know, they like taking the money for any reason anyway. So, I mean, I can't tell you how head up I get about this. It doesn't, you know, it offends me personally. It offends me philosophically. It offends me as a member of this community and as a school board member. We have a mandate to educate every child who comes into our building, to make every child who comes into our buildings safe first, because you can't learn anything if you're not safe, and then to give them the opportunities to learn and grow and stretch and succeed and thrive. That doesn't mean just the children whose families look like the ones we want them to look like. It doesn't mean just the children who fit a preconceived notion of who they should be. It doesn't mean just the children who agree with me or just the children who agree with you. It means every child. So, thank you.
Well, I have some, well, Dan, thanks. I mean, and your presentation before reading the whereases was very, very meaningful, and coming from a teacher, extra meaningful. What I see as the biggest problem is the interpretation of this legislation that uses divisive, or not age and developmentally appropriate. Who's going to come up with that? I mean, that's the slippery slope. I mean, you're going to have people that are going to make a witch hunt accusation against you, a teacher teaching American history, saying, oh, well, this is divisive, and just because they don't like you. That's what this is all going to be about. I mean, there's nothing concrete in it. And this is really just to rally a base of very conservative supporters. That's what all this is all about. There's no truth in the thought that we teach this evil critical race theory. There's just no truth to that. But they still make it believe that this is the case. So I am greatly concerned about how this thing is going to be interpreted, and how do you fight it? I mean, is there a due process? And there isn't.
There's not in the law. Another really scary piece about this is that you're right. They're putting the interpretation of what is divisive and what is age appropriate squarely in the hands of the State Board of Education. Now, it's very important to remember what the next step, or to see what the next step was likely to be, because there has been a move in Ohio and Columbus already, which is just a matter that something that the same legislature has the power to do, which is to eliminate the elected
Right.
members of the State Board of Education and have all of the members appointed by the governor, which would mean that the governor would be able to put hand-selected folks into the position where they are now deciding what is appropriate, what is divisive, and to basically have free rein for witch hunts, and witch hunts that could be for individual teachers who perhaps don't live a lifestyle that they appreciate, or individual school districts that have caused a little consternation in Columbus, that have a history of pushing back. So it's a power play to define what America is, and to what America will be to the next generation that we're handing the keys over to.
I think you've all stated where I feel. I mean, it's so frustrating, and I guess I just have to go back to the famous quote of, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a clear attempt to keep children from studying history.
Yep.
So what are the next steps? We vote?
We have to have
Yeah.
a motion to
Motion to,
approve the resolution.
yep.
Or a
Well-
motion to consider the resolution.
Okay, so there's sort of the mechanical approving and getting this down in Columbus, but, I mean, do we want to make an even bolder statement on our website, reach out to our families? I mean, I can't, based on what I heard this evening, I mean, this is going to pass, obviously. But is there anything in our power that we can do to elevate this higher?
Well, we can join our voices to those of the city councils and the library board, because they are also going to be addressing House Bill 616. And that would add a little bit more mass behind the movement.
Are you sharing this with the Northeastern Ohio School Board presidents to see if they're going to pass resolutions?
I haven't yet, because here it is, but I will, absolutely.
There will likely be an opportunity to provide testimony.
I was just wondering when that
As it is moving forward, I think that we can perhaps call for a meeting of our advocacy task force to look this over. There is, the League of Women Voters is hosting an Education Matters Advocacy Postcard Party on May 7th at 10 a.m. at the Forest Hills
Park.
Pavilion. So that's another opportunity that's available to folks.
Repeat
League of
that
Women
date
Voters
again,
is a
please.
fantastic, nonpartisan organization.
Can you repeat that date, please?
Yeah, it's May 7th. It's this coming Saturday.
It's this Saturday. Okay, so this Saturday, 10 o'clock, Forest Hill Park, the League of Women Voters is hosting a postcard writing party. Okay, and everybody who watches this tomorrow or later in the week should be aware of that.
And stay tuned.
Does it have a real chance of passing? Do we know?
As far as I can tell, the Ohio legislature feels absolutely no obligation to follow the will of your average Ohioan.
We have the backpack bill and stuff, and that's just sort of a volley over the stern of a ship. I mean, it's really not going to take root. Well, I mean, we have to still advocate against it, because you just don't.
Yeah, Jim,
No.
I don't think we can be complacent, or we can't afford to be complacent.
Oh, that's the answer I was hoping for.
Yeah, it's a great way to rally the base and to get folks beating their chests, and to
So
show
maybe
up
we
at
should
polls.
beat our heads instead, because we have brains to use. You know, it's,
One thing I would just add with House Bill 322 and 327,
Yeah.
in terms of the testimony, there's a, you have to watch, because the committee sponsors will quickly put a hearing on,
With
give
no
like
notice.
a day's notice. So if there's interest in testimony, we should have that testimony
Right.
ready, now, because likely, if it's like those other bills that, it's, you find out on Monday night, it's
That it's
Tuesday, like that.
Well, Dan's opening statement would be a great starting place for some testimony.
Thank you. I will certainly make myself available to testify if I possibly can.
I wonder if there's a way that we can have staff just sort of clip that out of the video and just sort of make it available to our families.
I'll leave it up to you.
I think that would be great. And then we could just have your remarks as a separate object available on the website or through the newsletters. That would be great. And this is, I don't know, I mean, this is so personal for everybody. It's personal for every African-American person in our community. It's personal for every member of the LGBTQ community in our community. It's personal for every child who's questioning their sexuality or their gender. It's just, we have to stand up for our right to teach our children everything, not just a tiny little bit that's acceptable.
Well, Malia, it impacts community members even greater
Yeah,
than our.
of course.
Than the communities that you suggested. Take science, okay? There was a time in our history where science was intentionally not taught, okay?
Right.
And so, is that divisive because people are going to disagree with it, so we're not going to teach a core fundamental piece on science? Or are we going to say, oh, well, this is not developmentally appropriate for a young child to learn science when you're trying to walk
Right.
down more of a religious path as opposed to a science path? And this is just, this is sort of outside of us. I don't want to use the word special interest group, but
Well, it
this-
targets specific subsets of Ohio, right, who are being specifically targeted by this. But because of the way it's written, it will affect everyone. Because you could similarly object to a teacher who walks in on Monday morning and, discusses
Evolution.
evolution. Yeah, or having gone on a picnic with his family, because it's so broad, it could be spun on its head, which is not what the writers intend. But the whole thing is just insane. Anyway, sorry.
It's un-American. It's undemocratic.
the return of McCarthyism
Yeah,
in
it's
sort
Yeah.
of.
creating,
Precisely.
creating Ohio, it's creating states, an apartheid state. You know, on top of this bill and with the Supreme Court, it's, you know, it's so disheartening. And, you know, our kids have to deal with, this is they're living this, and that's crazy.
So let's do the hard work of leadership
Yeah.
that we are pushing them to do.
I think there's supposed to be a rally in Columbus. I'll find out exactly the date.
Let us know when.
Yeah,
Please do.
but I think we should
Thank
all
you.
just, if we can go down and support
Yeah, I feel
it,
like we should
'cause,
just
yeah,
sort of
we gotta- we really
decamp and
gotta-
live out on the steps of the State House,
I
because
think
there's always something
all of our
going on.
cars know the way by now.
Yeah.
They do, they know how to get there by themselves.
So should we ask for a vote?
Yes, may I have a motion, please?
I motion we consider the resolution expressing opposition to Ohio House Bill 616.
And I second that motion.
Do we want to discuss any further, or are we ready for a vote?
I think we're ready for a vote.
Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Posh,
Yes.
Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Serini,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.